So we're finally starting to see my pullback thesis play out here in the S&P 500 as well as QQQ. We actually had quite a bit of selling today, 1.38% to the downside, which is the first day that we ended negative 1% or more in like 37 sessions, I think. So that's incredible. It's been a very long time now for both the S&P 500 as well as QQQ. Actually, what I want to start off with is the Qs here. We broke a couple key supports here, one being this first main trend line over here. You can see it starts all the way back, all the way down here. So you have to scroll back for quite a while down here at the beginning of June. So it's pretty much this upward trend that we've had all throughout the summer months, and we did break that for the first time today, not only on the hourly but also the daily. So that is a confirmation signal, typically indicative of more downside afterwards. So we not only broke this but also the key 376 level that I mentioned in the Sunday video. So we broke both of these and closed below on the day, and we also had a couple tech earnings after hours that were not the best overall. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens to end this week, especially because typically Thursday and Friday are characteristically bullish days in the market. So we'll see what happens here. But as of today's close, this is bearish confirmation for further downside in the market. So my pullback thesis is playing out nicely so far. Also on top of that, we did have more confirmation in the dollar today. As you can see over here, just based on the daily chart, a lot of continuation to the upside. We're now in about the high 102s, which is a lot of upside since the retest of this key trend line over here, all the way back in the middle of July. So this has helped with that weakness in equities overall. Also, if I go over here to the S&P 500 again, we did break below my key supply zone from up here. It was acting as a demand zone, at least for the past 2 days, because we were above it. Remember, whenever there's a key range, specifically this range here of 4,550 to roughly 4,575, whenever you're above that key range, it's going to act as a demand zone. And then whenever you're below it, it will act as a supply zone, and it will have resistance properties. But as of now, we did gap down quite a bit from this morning, and then had continuous sell-offs throughout the rest of the day. So typically that is indicative, similar to what I showed you on QQQ, at least based on QQQ's close, that is indicative of more downside afterwards. Of course, there's that Thursday and Friday price action, which is typically bullish. So we'll see based on the rest of the week. But this is a bearish close based on today because we had a prior potential distribution zone from up here where there's a lot of consolidation and distribution properties that was followed by a sharp downside move and a close below the previous range. So typically that means a lot more downside to come. But we will see here the first key level, at least for a minor support, would be roughly this 4,500. Seems to have been front ran just a little bit by the close of today, but I expect this will be retested fairly soon. If it can get under this, then we have a demand zone between 4,450 and 4,500 that will likely act as a minor support zone. This is the first minor support zone of this pullback thesis that I have, but my eventual target still is that sub 4,400 level between August and September of 2023. Also, the main chart that I want to show you guys is actually SPY's chart, because this is the main one that I showed you on the Sunday video. Remember this range between 453.22 to 455.41. I told you guys if we had a break below either of them, then we would see selling to the downside. We actually opened today just a tad below this 453.22 level, and it was unable to close back above intraday. So we continued the sell-off to the downside. So this level did end up working as a hard resistance, and we actually gapped down below this initial level, which acted as a support based on Tuesday's price action. So this ended up working very nicely. The key thing that I do want to show you is the dark pool levels for SPY just based on cheddar flow here. You can see 4.3 billion in premium at the 457.64 level. So over 4 billion in premium is definitely eye-catching. Very rare to see something like that. What's even more incredible is if you scroll down, you can see that another day this week we had also over 4 billion in premium. We had 4.3 billion at the 456.43 level. So both of these prints are a lot higher than the current price. 456 and 457 are up here. So this was between Monday and Tuesday of this week during this consolidation zone. And that most definitely is a sign of distribution, especially because of the sell that happened afterwards. So these levels are key distribution zones at the moment with a lot of premium behind them. Again, over 4 billion in premium, very rare to see, especially back-to-back days between Monday and Tuesday. And also, even today's print was substantial. If you scroll all the way down here, 3.9 billion, we almost hit 4 billion in premium. This was at the 450.12 level. So this is a little bit further down around that 450 level. That's right about where we closed today. So that could be some buying after a long sell-off for the day. We'll see where we open tomorrow and at least close on the week, because it's probably best to look for a weekly confirmation in this sense, because we're only 2 days away from that weekly close. But still, this is definitely interesting, especially because of how much premium we saw on those 2 days to start off this week between Monday and Tuesday. 4.3 billion as well as 4.3 billion both days. So that's definitely interesting. Again, very rare to see something like that. And just looking at the mini graphic up here, you can see both of those prints where they were, and then the eventual sell that happened right after that. So it seems that institutions were dumping before this sell-off. And it's going to be crucial to note where the dark pool levels, at least how much premium is going to be behind potential buys as we continue down. So this is a potential buy of 3.9 billion as well as 1.3 billion around this 450.12, 450.13 area. So we'll have to follow up on that, especially leading into the end of the week. If price can remain above that, then they can have a little bit more of a bullish bias, potential buying by institutions. Otherwise, if it can close below that, then that would be very bearish, especially because of the recent sell-off that we've seen so far. But going into the end of the week, what I'm going to be watching is that we maintain below specifically this 453.22 level. I'd expect that at the very least, but even more specific would be this low that we made based on Thursday of last week, roughly 452, around that range. As long as we can stay under that, we can see selling to the downside. And based on SPX's levels, the ones that I was showing you from earlier, we do have a minor support, of course, coming up here at roughly 4,500, and between 4,450 and 4,500, that is a demand range. So you can look for that once we sell off into that level. That's probably going to act as a minor bounce spot, and that's where personally I plan to trim my short position, because that's going to act as a minor bounce, like I just said. So other than that, at the moment, this is confirmation of more downside. We of course can have some mini rallies to the upside from here, especially after such a significant sell-off, considering we haven't had a negative 1% or more day in a very long time. So we can see some bounces from here, but as long as it maintains below this supply zone up here, we can see some more downside back into that 4,400 area. Other than that, continue to watch the levels that I provided in this video for the S&P 500 as well as QQQ. This 376.02 level is going to be very critical going forward. We could potentially go over it if it decides to bounce. QQQ is known for large dead cat bounces on the way down. So in this case, if it were to break above, then we'd likely see around this 379 level, which would be a complete retest of that trend line I showed you guys earlier in the video. That would be the absolute max that I'd like to see for some form of a relief rally, assuming that the downtrend still takes place. Otherwise, if it was able to get back above this trend line in the near term future, then I can see a lot more upside afterwards. But other than that, I will see you guys in the next video on Sunday.